How's it going, everybody? Gaurav, Bhatt and Mihir, Vasavda here. You're listening to the Express Sports Podcast. It's game time, your weekly sports wrap. Happy New Year, folks. Hoping this year is going to be a vast improvement over the crap storm that was 2020. On the last game time, we looked back at the year and the struggles, but for the first show, we decided to ditch the rear view for 1 week and try looking ahead at the trends incoming, trying to track the changing sporting landscape. Now, Mihir and I have butted heads over the new quote-unquote sports bursting into the mainstream. Now, breakdancing or breaking will be at the 2024 Olympics. But even before that, breaking and esports will make the Asian Games bow in 2022. Mihir, हम तो ये डिस्कस करते रहेंगे खैर कि क्या सही है क्या गलत है, but it made sense to bring in an expert to weigh in on these developments and look how these things will progress realistically, wasn't it?
Absolutely. हम अगर जो we would have been again fighting and really heading nowhere with our debates because हमारे stands काफी clear है, so it wouldn't have really led to anything. But yeah, so that's the reason we thought of getting this expert in. His name is Mr. Michael Payne. He was the marketing director of the International Olympic Committee for a very long time, and he's basically credited to make the Olympic brand what it is right now, and he's played a very crucial role in it, along with the IOC presidents through the 80s and 90s. So he has seen the Olympics evolve, and Gaurav, I think it is a very interesting time to bring him in because this is also the year where first time the Olympics, the rescheduled Olympics will be held. Obviously, there is a huge asterisk mark उसपे, and काफी अगर जो हम कह सके तो एक revolutionary changes are in the Olympic program. So I think it was apt to bring someone with experience of working within the IOC to kind of cut the clutter for us.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm very excited. I'm guessing so are our listeners. So without wasting any more time, let's head into the interview.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Thank you for joining us in what will be the very first episode of 2021.
No, it's a great honor to join you, and I hope that 21 will see the sports world slowly return to normal. We've all been missing it throughout this very unusual and very difficult year.
We have indeed, and I think a lot of responsibility for that will fall upon the Olympics. We were in touch at the time when the IOC had not yet postponed the Olympics. Now they have. What will be the biggest challenge between now and July for not just the IOC but the entire world to ensure that the Olympics take place this year?
Well, firstly, I think there's high confidence that the Games will take place. But in exactly what format, with the Games still 7 months away, it's difficult to tell. The world situation obviously continues to evolve very rapidly. Now that the vaccines are rolling out, people will have greater confidence to travel. I think there's no question that all the athletes and all the teams will be there. I think there will be tremendous support from the Japanese public, but it's unclear still how big an international public will be comfortable traveling in July, August 21.
It is an interesting challenge, but you have, Mr. Payne, you have been associated with the IOC, with the Olympic Games for a very long time now. You've seen a lot of things. If we just go into your association with the IOC, there were a very different set of challenges back then. I mean, it was the time when, because of the Cold War, there was a lot of diplomatic tension. The challenges faced by the Olympic Games were of very different kind back then.
Well, I mean, Tokyo will be my 20th Olympic Games. That's summer and winter. So I have been privileged to see firsthand a tremendous amount of Olympic history. And you're right, over those 40 years, the Olympic movement has seen many different challenges. When I first joined the IOC back in the early 80s, it was really an existential challenge. The Olympics was caught, as you say, in the crossfire of the Cold War and the era of state-led boycotts with no means of financing the games, with no cities wanting to come forward to host the games. Many people were writing the Olympic movement's obituary and saying, well, they've served the 20th century very well, but they've now become too big, too political, and can't continue. Fortunately, we were able to turn that around. And in the following 20 years, you saw the games grow and become ever more, successful. But even then, people would talk about the cancellation of the games only ever happening if there was a world war. And the games had been cancelled 3 times with the First and Second World Wars. But actually, during my time at the IOC, we came quite close 3 times to the games having to be postponed. You could imagine when 9/11 took place with Salt Lake City, if that terrorist incident had happened 2 months later, would Salt Lake City Winter Olympic Games in 2002 have gone forward? You had the explosion of the Icelandic volcano that closed the Northern Hemisphere's airways for 2 months. If the volcano had decided to go off, a couple of weeks before the opening ceremony, it would have made life very complicated. And then you had SARS. SARS outbreak had happened a little bit later. It would have completely disrupted the Beijing Games. So the risk factor of facing a postponement is not something that's been totally new. And the IOC had endeavored to, if you want, build up a war chest financially, which was very wise management, to support not just the IOC, but the whole sports movement in the event that there was some unexpected incident that would cause the games to be delayed or cancelled.
So in this backdrop, the fact that the Tokyo Games were postponed and now scheduled to be held in July, August this year, it is something that the IOC has pulled off, which not many would have expected, or they will pull off if we'll know closer to the games. Mr. Payne, but has hosting the Olympics become too complex a subject now for one city, for one country?
That's a great question, and one that sparks a lot of debate. There's no question that staging what is the world's largest, if you want, peacetime event is incredibly complicated, and even the most developed, advanced nations still struggle. It's not straightforward. And the IOC has sort of continued to try and control the growth and size and complexity of the games. It's not easy because, when you are so successful, everybody wants to get on the bandwagon. Every sport wants to be there. Every sport wants to use the games as their showcase, and nobody wants to get off the bus. And so the IOC's had a challenge as to how do you manage success? How do you manage growth? But at the same time, you want to evolve the Olympic program, to ensure that it has the best possible sports portfolio. I mean, I'm sure something we can discuss a little bit later, but I think for the first time, there is serious discussion going on now about whether cricket would come on to the Olympic program already, maybe for 2028. There's a lot of things that the IOC is doing. I'm working with some of them in areas of technology. The arrival of Chinese partner Alibaba is introducing a lot of new technology that is helping to simplify the operation of the games. To give one example, with cloud technology will be allowing a lot of the broadcasters who have to take tremendously large operating teams to the Olympic host city to scale that right back and keep a significant part of their team back in their host city, because the cloud technology is allowing the transmission and management of the signals to be managed at a distance. And maybe just to give a couple of examples that put this into context, in Tokyo next summer, there will be close to 8,000 hours of original sport broadcast. 8,000 hours. For the Soccer World Cup, the other largest event in the world, there are 200 hours. And it's 200 hours spread over a month versus 8,000 hours spread over 16 days. And that's just one sort of example of the sheer size and complexity. And if you are able to continue to sort of embrace technology that helps to improve the whole presentation, improve the whole experience for the participants, but also simplify it, it becomes also a showcase as to where the world is going. The other key aspect that IOC President Bhatt has introduced is a lot more flexibility in the presentation of the games. So in particular, saying, look, don't build new facilities if you don't need the facilities as a legacy. Don't build new facilities if you can do it just as easily with temporary facilities. If a country wants to come forward with 2 cities as a joint bid and wants to adjust the sports program, then that's all fine.
Mr. Payne, you mentioned evolution of the Olympic Games and transmission of 8,000 hours of original sports over a period of 16 days. Now, we can perhaps debate that how much of those 8,000 hours do people actually watch, because there are a lot of sports which are not quote-unquote mass sports like weightlifting or wrestling or even some form of track and field. The global appeal might not be that much. And simultaneously, we are seeing this whole push by esports now, which wants to enter into the scenario. Now, Gaurav and me here are completely different end of spectrum. I am anti-esports. Gaurav is completely pro it, and he does have a very open mind for esports. How do you look at the scenario? Because you mentioned Alibaba's involvement, technological advancements that are being adopted at IOC. So what is your take on it?
Well, obviously there are a few sports like athletics or swimming, gymnastics, volleyball that are popular worldwide and have an important share of the broadcast coverage. But then when you look at how each country or region follows the games, the profile of the sports that they're interested in is very, very different. I mean, you in India, are obviously, one of the leading nations in hockey. And so you would have a lot of hockey coverage. I can assure you, in America, there wouldn't be a lot of hockey coverage. You go to the Middle East, Turkey, Iran, you'll have tremendous coverage on wrestling. You wouldn't necessarily see a lot of wrestling coverage in France. So part of the beauty of the Olympic sports program is you can really customize it to what each nation is interested in. And secondly, with the new technology, whilst there might be a fairly small audience for, let's come back to hockey, in America, there is still an audience who would like to follow and not be squeezed out just because people only want to watch swimming. So the multi-channel environment, and this is what's really driven the 8,000 hours, that in a lot of countries now, you have every single moment of sport being shown. You have the lead channel doing the traditional sort of buffet table coverage of all the great moments. But then you have the individual channels where, as a dedicated fan, you can follow each sport. So clearly, if nobody's interested in a given sport, that sport's not going to last long on the Olympic program. And the decision on which new sports come on the program is also very much based on their strength and popularity. And there's a vocal debate about which sports should go on the program. Most recently, the decision of Paris to take breakdancing, which, depending where you sit as to how vocal you want to be. Esports, we can have as a separate discussion in a second.
It certainly can be esports. Let's steer towards that direction, part of our conversation, because let alone the philosophical debate of what is and what is not sport. You just mentioned that we need sports at the Olympics who need that sort of an exposure. Now, the thing that is usually cited in favor of esports is the large number of streamers and all these users and children who are watching it and the younger audience that it caters towards. Do you feel that esports needs Olympics?
Esport is based on it's based on sport in the sense of whether you're playing with the football game or any one of the sports. And I think there is a strong partnership and relationship. You look at now what's happening with cycling and how they're taking cycling into the gym and competitions online. I think there is a powerful partnership. And if you go to the athletes' village, where you've got the 10,000 greatest athletes, in their downtime, they are, doing a lot of esport training. You go to Formula One, and the Formula One drivers are even officially training on esport using the tracks for their training mechanisms. So there is clearly an important and strong partnership. Esport exposes new sports to the younger generation. It exposes them to the rules, how it's played, and it builds interest in the sport. So in that sense, there is, I think, a clear, important partnership for the traditional sport to be engaged with esport, for showcasing their sport, for getting new fans involved, and for esport to building and creating new content. Now, whether you extend that esport becomes a medal sport on the Olympic program, that it becomes one of the disciplines of each sport, that's another discussion. And at the moment, I've probably not been exposed enough to esport to be on the Olympic program, but that it's a partnership that you will see extensively throughout the village, that you will see promotions building up, creating, as a sort of as a magnet for bringing more younger people into the sport. Absolutely.
Mr. Payne, there is another angle to it, isn't there? I mean, right now, we are seeing large TV corporations pouring in billions of dollars to show the Olympic Games. We don't know how much COVID will impact that, but there will also be a time, perhaps 5, 8, 10 years down the line, where the streaming platforms, your Amazons and Netflixes, might want to bid for the Olympic Games and broadcast it. Now, with these games, do you think there will be a time when they'll also be looking at esports as a part of reaching out to the younger generation? I mean, when you talk to the broadcasters, to the sponsors, what do we expect from the Olympic Games now compared to the 90s or 80s?
What the broadcaster wants is very simply eyeballs. As many people as possible as watching. And in what is an ever more fragmented media market, because if you want 30 years ago, you would turn on the TV and you'd have 2 channels to watch. Today, you turn on your screen, no longer your TV, and you have an unlimited number of channels. And so for the main broadcasters, their share of the audience is collapsing. And it's why high-profile sport is one of the few content that guarantees to get a mammoth audience again. And it'll be the same in your country, say with cricket. It's the only content that is really getting, if you want, super audiences. So in that sense, sport is fortunate to be one of the very few content platforms left that guarantees a mammoth audience. Now, the media environment in the world, of course, is changing. I mean, for half of the Olympics, for half of Olympic history, up until 1960, television was irrelevant. The president of the IOC at the time, Avery Brundage, when television was introduced, wasn't a big fan. His response was, we've done perfectly well without television for the last 50 years. We can do perfectly well without it for the next 50 years. Never mind the financial benefits, just as a vehicle for engaging and sharing the people worldwide. Now, in 50 years' time, will the traditional TV channels even still exist? Who knows? Will there be a new platform and channel that we haven't even heard of, that hasn't even been invented today? Quite possibly. For the IOC, what their focus is as to how can you ensure that the Olympic content can be freely available for everybody in the world to watch. Now, that the freely available, I think, takes the principle that the great moments, the gold medals being won by that country, everybody can watch without charge. Now, if you then want to go on and watch all of the basketball and you pay a $1 subscription, and you don't want advertising during the breaks, then you will have what I would call different business production models for the second tier of coverage. But the very first tier of coverage, all of the great moments live, free, I think that's a fundamental principle that the IOC, not looking at it from a business standpoint, but looking at it so that if you want serving humanity, that the Olympic Games in the end belongs to humanity, and humanity should be able to watch and follow it with the minimum of barriers.
Mr. Payne, I have a two-pronged question about the inclusion of breakdancing at Paris. Firstly, your views again on breaking being at the Olympics, and secondly, does it in a sense show the significance of Youth Olympic Games, in the sense it's in Paris in 2018 where breakdancing suddenly emerged and became a contender?
The decision on breakdancing came from the local organizing committee. The IOC has decided that each host organizing committee, in order to maximize the local interest in the host nation, should be allowed to propose 2 or 3 sports that they think are really appropriate to their setup and culture. Why the Japanese for Tokyo 2020 proposed karate and baseball, neither of which are then being proposed by Paris. So you're allowing for an element of customization in the local market. I think you raised the issue of the Youth Olympic Games, which I think is still very much a work in progress. The first 2 or 3 editions of the Youth Olympic Games, I think, struggled to find their way in that the IOC was an initiative of President Rog, wanted to have sort of a vehicle to engage and inspire the youth in the Olympic movement. The problem with the early Youth Olympic Games was they became mini Olympics with a tremendous cost to stage and no media coverage, no TV coverage. And the schools around the world had no idea that they were taking place. So you have to question whether they were delivering on the vision. When they went to Buenos Aires for the first time, with, I think, a very inspired leadership and the Argentinian government, they sort of transformed the whole presentation, and it became a mini sort of test bed of new ideas, new thinking, new sports. And for the first time, I think the Youth Olympic Games began to sort of perhaps find a way forward that was intelligent. And the showcasing from 3-on-3 basketball to breakdancing to other opportunities, it allowed both the IOC, the sports federations, and the local orgs to experiment in the way you would at a normal company. You'd go out and test products. Well, part of the problem, for the Olympic Games was you didn't have a simple mechanism for testing. And so that's evolving work in progress to, I think, an interesting place. And we'll see what happens with breakdancing. It was successful in the Youth Games in Buenos Aires. Paris wants to create a very strong urban youth culture, with the skateboarding, inline skating. And that's a good evolution.
Mr. Payne, to conclude our discussion, from, say, in 10, 12 years from today, maybe 2032 Olympics or 2036 Olympics, how do you view a new Olympian would be? We are talking about evolution here. We're talking about esports and dancers getting into the Olympics. When the contingents will walk out for the opening ceremony, will we see these geeky-looking gamers or people with dancers' body replacing, these muscular, athletic-looking people walking with the flags and walking around at the stadium?
Well, I think you're identifying there two very different groups. I mean, I think if you were to talk to the dancers, I'm not sure you would dispute some of their athletic capability. I mean, you look at the gymnasts or the synchronized swimmers of today, there might have been raised eyebrows 40, 50 years ago saying, well, what are they doing on the Olympic program? And now they are a core part of the program. The move to esport, that's a big jump, because you're then looking at, if you want, mental agility versus athletic agility. And you've got sports like chess desperate to try and get on the Olympic program and arguing that it is a sport driven by mental agility, clearly not physical. So that's going to be a debate and discussion that we're going to see for many years to come. And I think, you and the media are at the forefront of provoking the debate as to what sports, also what events should be on the Olympic program, and how do you maintain the program to be contemporary?
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Payne, for joining us. I think it's really been an intriguing, interesting conversation. And like we said, if the Olympics will be the center stage for everything in this new year, we'll keep our fingers crossed that it does happen, and there's no jinxing it this time around.
No, I think we all hope that Tokyo 2020 takes place in 21. I think they have the ability potentially to stage one of the greatest Olympic Games ever. The Japanese organizers have probably rarely has there been an organizing committee that has been so prepared. The Japanese people have a tremendous history of their passionate support for the Olympics. And I think the world, they wants to get back to normal. And the Games, sort of celebrating the world coming back together, having succeeded in fighting the virus. I just hope that now with the vaccines and everything, that things will move quickly. Although looking at what's happening back in the UK at the moment, taken a slight step backwards. And then maybe we can come back. I am publishing a major book shortly before the Tokyo Olympic Games that brings together the work of 400 of the world's greatest cartoonists looking at the Olympics over the last 100 years. And there's a few great Indian cartoonists in there. And when you look at the skill, wit, sarcasm of these cartoonists and how they've told the Olympic story, I've edited it down to 1,200 cartoons and then written a personal commentary as to what on earth was going on at the time. And in there are many Olympic stories that have never been told, which I think will cause a few raised eyebrows and interest as we have the final countdown to the games. So maybe in a few months' time, we can come back and talk a little bit more about the history.
There's something more to look forward to this summer then.
One thing I guarantee was it will cause everybody to laugh and smile.
Perfect. That's all we need.
Yeah.
Fascinating conversation with Mr. Payne. Mihir, तेरे लिए सबसे बड़ा takeaways क्या था from this interview?
यही कि शायद breaking and esports or surfing would become mainstream in maybe 10-15 years, which might not be really great news, but well, it is what it is. तेरे लिए क्या था?
Yeah, it's even before that, right? We focused a lot more on the trends and trying to gaze into the crystal ball. But even this year, Mihir, जो Olympics का rescheduling था, like you said at the top of the show, कि it's revolutionary in the sense कि this isn't something that we've seen in our lifetimes. तो वो देखने में भी काफी इंटरेस्टिंग हुआ कि हम ई स्पोर्ट्स ब्रेकिंग का खैर बात कर रहे हैं 2024 का, बट अभी 2021 शुरू ही हुआ है एंड वी स्टिल we have our fingers and our toes all crossed कि सब कुछ ठीक टाइम से रहे. तो I'll err on the cautionary side, और अभी मेरे को 2021 का ही नहीं पता क्या होने वाला है. तो let's focus on the now ना.
I know, and now is pretty uncertain actually. I mean, even though we hope that magically the virus would go away at the start of this new year, we don't know whether the Olympics will happen or not. I mean, from whatever we are hearing so far, there will be a much clearer picture by March. And it's just too complex a situation. I mean, काफी सारे qualifyings अब तक बाकी है. The travel between countries is still not easy. I was just reading that China haven't sent their badminton team for the 3 tournaments in Thailand, which are starting this month. So it is still very complicated, and it's just a very difficult position that IOC and the organizers of the Tokyo Olympics are in with the conduct of the games.
Yeah, man, cases are cropping up in Japan, new mutant strains and what have you. But like we said, पहले एपिसोड के लिए तो कम से कम कोशिश करते हैं कि आपस में फूट ना पड़े, हम लोग ना लड़ें, प्लस थोड़ा सा दुखदाई चीजों पे ना फोकस करें. और आई फील बैड बिकॉज आई एम द वन हु सेड दिस वाज द बिगेस्ट टेक अवे फॉर मी. बट या लेट्स फोकस ऑन द पॉजिटिव्स. होपफुली थिंग्स गेट सॉर्टेड. द क्वालिफाइंग दो विल बी कीपिंग एन आई आउट कि कितना होता है क्या नहीं होता है. सारे स्पोर्ट्स में बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग. एंड मीर वो एक चीज है, द रन अप is even more fascinating sometimes than the actual event, right? The main event at the Olympics की कौन है कौन नहीं है, the last chance saloon and who made it, who missed the cut. That's so many narratives are involved there. I don't know इस बारी कैसे होगा, कितना ज़्यादा crunched होगा, but we'll see, listeners. And you guys stay tuned to Game Time and the Express Sports Podcast. अब तो हमने Express Deliveries डालना भी start कर दिया है. The second entry came out after the second test, which was a historic away win for India. More importantly, guys, stay safe and again have a happy new year. Mir, तू एक बार तो बोल दे यार कम से कम, what is this Grinch-like behavior from you?
Of course, I just directly jumped into the podcast. My bad. Wishing all of you guys a very happy new year. And even if it's marginally better than 2020, I think we'll have it good.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, guys, stay safe and adios.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Joshua Thomas and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.